Alrighty, it is 8 o'clock, so I'm going to get started with our live stream here. Alrighty, it is 8 o'clock, so I'm going to get started with our live stream here. Got my sound on over there. So again, as you have questions and you have anything that you need, just let me know in the comments. I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between the screens here. But really what I wanted to spend time doing here is I wanted to kind of go over just the basic concepts for each one of the units and then leave it wide open for anybody that's interested in any questions or anything. So let's get started. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about supply and demand. So bear with me here. This is my first live stream. Also, first time using Mrs. Wolf's Surface Pro here. So kudos to her and appreciate her helping out. So we're going to figure this thing out as we go. But I believe we're in a good spot here. I've been playing with it all day. So what we're looking at here is basically unit 1. And I want to talk about probably the biggest item here is the production possibility curves. So the first concept here is when we talk about production possibility curves, we're talking about the idea that we have 2 goods or services that we're producing with a limited amount of resources. So what we've seen with some of the supply and not supply and demand, but the practiced multiple choice questions is we've seen the idea that we have 2 resources. Well, we don't have 2 resources. We have actually unlimited amount of resources. In this case, it's really all about the concept that it's 2 different goods and services that we're trying to produce. So we are going to be operating on 2 goods and services. So we're going to do good A and good B, just to be as broad as we possibly can be here. We do know that we have 2 types of curves. We have increasing, and if it's increasing, that's going to be where we have resources that are not completely substitutable, right? So not completely substitutable. So we're talking about the idea that we really don't have the ability to just interchange them. So for example, if we were doing mittens and gloves, mittens and then 5-finger gloves, well, they're using the same materials, same type of resources. So therefore we could interchange them pretty quickly. Well, in this case, when it's increasing, we're talking about doing mittens and hard hats. Well, they're not very interchangeable. So we'll keep moving forward here. And then we also have what is called constant. And this is when our opportunity costs are going to be relatively substitutable. So we'll put substitute here. Okay, so they're substitutable. So if we're going to be doing an increasing opportunity cost curve, it's going to look like this. It's going to be bow-shaped. And we're going to be looking at the idea that we have a point on the graph. A lot of times they'll ask point like here, A, B, and C. And what they're basically going to ask you is, well, which one has a greater opportunity cost? Which one is going to cause us to have the most opportunity cost? Well, the easiest way to do this is just to simply see if we're going to move left or right on our axis here, our horizontal axis. Just let's take a look here. If we were going to go from point A, our opportunity cost of point A is going to be this box here. So maybe it's just a couple, 1, 2 units. If we're going to do the opportunity cost of B, it's going to be this box here, the larger box, and that's going to be maybe 12, 15, 20 units, whatever it may be. If we're going to do C, it's going to be this large box here, okay? And if we're doing that, then we're going to see that obviously C has the greatest opportunity cost of all of those. So that is a question that we have seen here with the opportunity cost and how it's set up. Now, anything that's on the line, anything on the line here, anything that resides on the line is going to be considered completely efficient. So this is maximum efficiency. So anything that resides on the line is going to be maximum efficiency. Anything inside the curve is going to be, we'll say like point X. Anything inside the curve is going to actually have what we call inefficiency. So we're not using all of our resources wisely. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Obviously, any point outside the curve is going to be impossible with our current resources. So we actually can't even produce at that point. Now, again, this is all with our current resources. Okay, this is our current resources. This is assuming that we cannot gain any additional resources. We don't have any available resources to us at this point beyond what we already have. So this is essentially what our curve is going to look like, our graph here. Okay, so the other things that we may see is how do we shift this curve inward? Well, an inward shift of the curve, will look like this. We're going to actually see these arrows in here. Let's see if the yellow shows up. So this curve could shift inward like this. That would mean that our opportunity costs of A and B have remained the same, because we're keeping the same ratios and the same similar things here because we're moving the curve in. But what it means is we've actually had a loss of resources. So an inward shift is a loss of resources. And that's important to know. This is not unemployment. Okay, this is not unemployment. This here is unemployment. Okay, any point inside the curve is considered to be unemployment. Shifting the curve inward is not unemployment. It means we have actually lost our resources. Okay, that's again important to know. We can also have an outward shift. And if we have an outward shift, this means we've acquired more resources. If we haven't acquired resources, it's most likely going to be the idea that maybe we've had technology. So maybe we've acquired resources, or it could be some type of increase in technology. So we could see our technology go up as well, which could then shift our curve outward. Okay. Again, those are just the concepts that we could with an outward shifting curve, which if we put pink here, we could see an outward shifting curve look like this. Okay. And that's an outward shifting curve. Okay. And then the last one would be some type of partial shift. So if our curve didn't shift completely, just partially, and we have the idea here that we have a partial shift of the curve. So it looks something like this. We have an increase in technology in only one sector. So it's going to look like that. Okay. That's Mrs. Wolf there. Sorry. Are we still sharing? Doesn't look like we're sharing, is it? Screen share. Where do we go? Application right here, share. Let's try that. Maybe that'll pop back up. Sorry about that. So then we have the idea here that we have an increased technology in just one sector. So maybe for product B, we found a new technology that would allow us to just partially shift that curve outward. Okay, so that's important to kind of keep in mind there as well. Okay, so this is the gist of the production possibility curve, but I do want to draw another curve here to kind of hit you with a couple other concepts that might be of importance here. So if I'm going to draw this curve, let's say again we have, let's say, guns and butter. So this is our butter. This would be guns. Okay, and say we're at point A. And we have a point B, we have a point E. Okay, so one of the questions that we're most likely going to get is the idea of changing points and how do we issue opportunity costs here. So want to be able to identify some of these major concepts with the opportunity cost and how we can calculate this. So again, I don't want to spend too much time on production possibility curves, but they will show up. But if we have essentially these areas here, and I'm just going to draw a few of them just to kind of give you an idea, because I know some of you have been missing some of these questions here on the quizzes in the review guide. But say this is 20, and this is 10, and then this is 0, and this is 1, and this is 3. We've got a 2 in here. So what is the opportunity cost for moving from point A to point B? So from A to B would be our question. And hopefully you're able to see that we're going to be losing 10 guns in this case. Okay, 10 guns in this case. So that would be our opportunity cost going B to A. What is our opportunity cost going from B to A? And that's going to be 2 butter, because we're going from 3 to 1, from 3 to 1. So that's important again to take a look there. Okay. What if I were to say that we're operating at point A, and then we have an increase in unemployment? Okay. What would be our movement there, though? What would be the movement that would cause us to have unemployment? And that would be from A to E then. Okay. Now, again, a lot of times they'll try to get you and they'll say, oh, we've increased unemployment. Well, that just means that our unemployment is growing. So we're actually going from A to E. If we decrease unemployment, that would be from E to A then. Okay. Is there a movement here that we have that would not have an opportunity cost? So is there a movement on the graph that we would not see any opportunity cost? And that would be, again, from E to A. Because notice with this one, and this is not something we've talked a whole lot about, but notice at point E here, we've actually decided to produce at E, say we're producing maybe 8, and we're producing 1 of butter. So at point E to A, we actually increase what? We increase 12 guns, and we lose, it wouldn't be gums, 12 guns, and we lose 0 butter in this case, because at the end, we're still producing 1 butter. And hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Are there any questions on Unit 1 in general? And I kind of want to open that up here to your guys' questions on Unit 1. Anything about comparative and absolute advantage? Anything about production possibility curves that you're still struggling with? I'm trying to think of any other major topics that I've seen people miss questions on with this. Just give me like a no, I don't have any questions, or actually throw out a question, so that way I have an idea if you guys are feeling like you have any questions or not in the comments there. Otherwise, I'll just move on to the next topic, but I want to give you a moment to see if there are any questions. Can you do a comparative and absolute advantage? One just for funsies. Yeah, we'll definitely do one. I can do that. Any other questions at this point? Yeah, let's do that while we're kind of waiting. If anybody else has any other questions, just shoot them out there. Again, I'll keep an eye on the screen there. I want to make sure that I get to any questions people do have with input. Okay, Jenna, I can help out with that as well. So we'll do an output and an input. Now, here's the thing. I mean, I can do the terms of trade, but one of the areas that I want to avoid is the idea that these questions they're not going to be an FRQ. Okay, they won't be an FRQ. They're going to be in the multiple choice section, and most likely it's going to be kind of laid out for you as you've kind of seen in some of those practice quizzes. But again, I will certainly help out with that because I think it's an important concept. So let's do one of the input and one of the output questions, and maybe that'll help us work through these questions a little bit better. The other thing that I was going to mention is don't get too antsy about terms of trade. I still don't know that I've really seen a terms of trade question. So it's one of those things we learn it just because we need to. But let's not get crazy here and think that we have to do a terms of trade. It may pop up, but boy, I really doubt it. So, anyways, let's get into it then. Let's do an input, comparative and absolute advantage. So we're going to call this absolute and comparative. Let's say we have two ladies. I don't know, just some random names here. Let's say Jenna and Caitlin. And they are producing apple pies and cookies. Apple pies and cookies. So, in order for them to produce apple pies and cookies, we have, and actually, what I should probably do is let's put Caitlin below Jenna here. Boy, I got to redo that, or else I'm gonna really regret my life here. Let's put Caitlin below Jenna because this is how we typically do things when we've all created the charts. What you'll notice is if they create the chart and the test for you, they may put the people up top. They may put Caitlin and Jenna like I did up here. Well, that's kind of going to mess up how we see the process a little bit. But anyway, so they can do two things. One is an apple pie, and one is baking cookies. Baking cookies. So let's do cookies. Okay. And it takes Jenna approximately, let's say 3 hours to bake the cookies she needs to bake. And this again is how long does it take to bake a dozen cookies? So it takes 3 hours from scratch to bake a dozen cookies, and it takes 6 hours for Jenna to make an apple pie again from scratch. Some pretty intense happenings here. Well, Caitlin, she really takes her time because it takes her 12 hours. And for the cookies, it takes her, let's say, 10 hours. So this is our setup. So again, we're looking at an input question. So the input question would be, I don't know, who has the absolute advantage in producing apple pies? Well, again, with an input question, we want to say, well, who is it that can do it in the shortest period of time? Well, Jenna can do it in 6 hours versus Caitlin, who can do it in 12 hours. So for apple pie, it would be Jenna. And then who has the absolute advantage in baking cookies? Well, that's 3 hours versus 10 hours. So for cookies, it is also Jenna. Okay. Comparative and absolute advantage then. Let's take a look here. What our other option then is, let me erase this circle here and get sloppy. Try my best here. All right. So then we want to do comparative and absolute advantage. So we're done with absolute advantage. So let's talk about comparative. So comparative advantage in this case, we want to identify the other goes under. So this is an input question. So we want to do the opportunity cost. So other goes under. So during the 6 hours that it takes Jenna to make one apple pie, how long or how many rather batches of cookies could she have made? Well, if it took her 3 hours to do a batch and 6 hours to do one apple pie, other goes under. 6 over 3 is 2. So in this case, she could do 2 cookies in the same amount of time that she could do one apple pie. So her opportunity cost of the apple pie is 1 cookies. Okay, or 2 cookies, I'm sorry. So then over here, Caitlin, she can do 1 apple pie in 12 hours. And its other goes under. So during that same 12 hours, we could do 1 full set of cookies, but we're going to fall quite a bit short on a second batch. So it's actually going to be what, 1.2? 12 over 10, am I right? 1.2? Okay, so 1.2. So then our opportunity cost is 1.2 cookies there. Okay, everybody, one making sense? So let's go over here. In this case, we're going to be using reciprocals, which is nice. So you've already done the math. So it's 1 cookie for 1/2 of an apple pie. And over here, it's going to be 1 cookie for, well, it's 10/12, so 5/6 of an apple pie. Okay. So again, when we want to do competitive advantage here, we want to be able to identify who has the lowest opportunity cost in producing apple pies. Well, Caitlin has to give up 1.2 cookies, whereas Jenna has to give up 2 cookies. So the opportunity cost is lower here. So she's going to produce the apple pies, Caitlin will. And then over here, 1/2 versus 5/6. Clearly, Jenna is going to be lower here. But again, if we're using reciprocals, you can't have both ways here. Okay, so Caitlin can't do cookies and apple pies like Jenna could do the absolute value. This is comparative advantage, so they can't both do it. So that would be your answer then. So Jenna would take care of the cookies, and Caitlin would take care of the apple pies. Okay, now all that is to say what? And this is why I hesitate to go too much in depth on these, because really what the question is going to probably ask you is just who has the comparative advantage in them. And you're not going to have to identify the opportunity cost. If it asks you to do the opportunity cost, you can certainly do that. But really, if we're looking for an input question, let's just cross multiply here, the quick and dirty method. So this is 60. 12 times 3 is 36. In this case, we're looking for the lower number because it's an input. And boom, we're done. Then we know that Jenna is going to do the cookies because this is 12 and 3. So Jenna's got cookies. Caitlin's got the apple pies. And then we're done. We move on to the next question. With these multiple choice, I've heard that it takes much of the time. So you're not going to have a whole lot of time to waste, especially if you're doing if in doubt, graph it out. So really important for you to just keep moving, keep trying to identify as much as you can the easy ones, and then come back to the more difficult ones. Okay, so let's do it really quickly. I'm going to jump right into it here. Let's say we have Bella and Jenna, a different Jenna maybe. Bella and Jenna, and they're producing product X and Y. And in the time periods, and this is an output, given one day, Jenna can do 20 of good X and let's say 10 of good Y. And Jenna can do 18 of X and 6 of good Y. Okay. So again, absolute advantage. Well, who has the most in this case? Because it's an output question. So who can produce the most? Well, Bella can produce more of the X and she can produce more of the Y. So Bella has the absolute advantage in both X and Y. Okay, X and Y. And then Jenna is going to be 18 and 6. So really, she doesn't play a role in the absolute advantage. Let's take a look at comparative advantage then. Comparative advantage, well, again, if it's an output question, you can just multiply this. So we're looking at 120 and we're looking at 180. Well, what's greater here, 120 or 180? Because it's an output, we want a bigger number. So it's 180. So in this case, it looks like Jenna is going to be producing X and Bella is going to be producing Y. Now, if we want to go through the process, let's take a look here. Well, other goes over. So for Bella to produce X, her opportunity cost is 1X for 1/2 of a Y. Okay. And then down here, Jenna is make that look like an X, 1X for other goes over. So it looks like 1/3 of a Y. And for them to produce Y, it's 1Y for 2X and 1Y for 3X. Should probably do X. Kidding me? 3X. Okay. So again, let's look here. Well, who has the lower opportunity cost of producing X? Well, 1/3 is lower. And over here, who has the lower opportunity cost of producing Y? Well, 2 is lower than 3. So again, it takes us right to this combination that we have up there. Okay. Any other questions? There, I see some nice old complicated graph review would be cool. Do you have a specific one, Kayla? Anything that toots your fancy there, fits your fancy? Anything specific that you want? Let me know on that as well. What do we think? We feeling good about Unit 1? Ready to move on to Unit 2? Anybody? I'm going to assume we're ready to go. Again, just communicate with me through the live chat there. That way I know what you guys are thinking and feeling here. I am not going to actually do a lot on supply and demand because we spent so much time on supply and demand that I really feel like you guys are really strong in supply and demand. Many people are actually getting better scores on the supply and demand stuff than they are in Unit 1, 3, 4, and 5. 6, not a whole lot of people have done it, but yeah, I think we're ready to rock and roll. So most people are saying that they're ready to go. So let's go ahead and go back to the graph paper then. We're going to do then Unit 2. So Unit 2. Now, again, with supply and demand, we're going to see this a lot in different variations, which is another reason why I don't want to really go crazy here over supply and demand, even though you guys know my love for supply and demand and how much I enjoy it. I don't want to spend too much time because we do have some other stuff to talk about. But let's talk briefly about what a supply and demand graph looks like. So if we have our basic, you know it, price and quantity, and then we have our downward sloping demand curve. We'll mark it D1, which you've done a million times. We got S1. We got the intersections here. And let's say price, equilibrium, Q, equilibrium. That works. So let's say we have a demand shift right. Okay, demand shift to the right. Why does it always reset there? Demand shift to the right. So we're going to want to figure out what happens to our price and what happens to our equilibrium quantity here. So again, demand's going to shift to the right. So if that happens, we have an increase in price and we have an increase in quantity. Okay. So again, anytime demand shifts to the right, because we're moving along the supply curve, we're moving in inverse curve in the demand curve. We're moving it along a direct relationship, which is a supply curve. Price and quantity are direct relationships. So actually, they're both going to move in the same direction. So price up, quantity up, just because we're moving along a supply curve, which is actually a direct relationship between price and quantity. So when we shift supply and demand, we're actually shifting it opposite of what we know about them. So again, if we were to shift the supply curve, we're moving it along the demand curve, which is an inverse relationship. So then your price and quantity are actually going to be inverse in their identification over here. Okay. So let's go back then. Let's say we shift supply to the right. So if we shift supply to the right, it's going to be S2. And then we notice price has done what? Price has gone down. Yes, Caitlin, we'll go over the difference between change in quantity and a change in price. I like that. Well, actually, the same thing. Change in quantity and change in demand. Good concept to go over. So there's your difference. You have PE2 and then QE2 here. Okay. So again, in this case, we went price down and we went quantity up. Okay. So again, the supply and demand stuff, I think we really, the big thing is just having a general understanding of what is what in terms of, okay, supply is going to go to the right. What's that going to do to pricing quantity? You're going to see that a lot in the multiple choice. And then also whenever we get to perfect competition, depending on which way you shift it, it's going to change the price for our firm and not just the market. So that's important to keep in mind as well. So let's talk about the change in quantity versus change in demand, which is a very big concept for us here. So let's just start here. Say we have good A, and good A, I don't even want to say it, but we'll say it, is Pepsi. Okay, we have Pepsi. Here's the demand curve for Pepsi. Here's the supply curve for Pepsi as well. This is where the market is hanging out. Okay. And we're going to see this time and time again. So actually, you know what? Let's take out the supply curve just for the moment because it's going to get a little more complicated. So let's just do a demand curve. So in case if we're looking at Pepsi's demand, in case if we're wondering, it's maybe at Q1 and the price is at P1. So this is where we're operating, and this is what's going on in our market at this point. I want to look at the idea here that we also have another good that's related because we have related goods. And this is going to be for Coke. And this is going to be for Coke. So we have Coke and Pepsi in this case. So let's say that actually we should probably say maybe Coke is, people are buying Coke here. And we got P1 there. Okay, so we got Coke and Pepsi. So right now, both are operating different graphs, different products, and we know them as substitute goods. So let's say that the price of Pepsi goes up. Let's say the price of Pepsi goes up. If the price of Pepsi goes up, we're going to call it P2. And we're going to say it's going to go over and it's going to intersect with our demand curve here. And then going to drop down. And this is going to be Q2, which means we're going to shift that demand curve, or not, I'm sorry, not shift. We're going to move that quantity demanded to the left. So we're actually essentially just moving along our demand curve. So this is a change in quantity demanded. This is a change in quantity demanded. Okay. This is a change in quantity demanded because, again, the price went up, so our quantity demand has gone down. Now, if this happens, this scenario happens and the price goes up, we know something's going to happen in the Coke industry because we consider them to be substitutes. So if the price of Pepsi goes up, the quantity demanded has gone down. Well, what's going to happen in our market? I mean, people still want their soda. They still want to drink the soda. So they're going to turn to a substitute, and that's going to be Coca-Cola. However, Coke's price is not going to change at all because Coke doesn't care what Pepsi does, which is not quite true, but Coke is not going to change their price. So actually, in order to increase our quantity to Q2, because more people are going to be buying Coke, we can't change price. We actually have to do what? We have to shift our demand curve to the right, and this is going to change our actual demand. People want Coke more because Pepsi has increased their price. So notice our price at Coke is still at P1. So price has not changed. However, quantity demanded has changed. Okay, quantity demanded has changed. Does that help out for those that were struggling with quantity demanded and change in demand? Let me know if it didn't, and I can revisit that maybe in a different way. But that is essentially your big difference between a change in quantity demanded versus a change in demand. Again, just shoot me a comment there to let me know if that helped. I am going to go to Alyssa and the idea of excise tax, because this is going to be a question that's going to happen. And you got to be prepared for it in a couple different ways. So what you really need to know about the excise tax here is with excise tax, we're really looking at a couple components here. We can have consumer and producer surplus. We can have the area of the tax. So let's just jump right into it here. So I want to make sure we cover all concepts here. So we have Q1, or not Q1, but Q for quantity. And let's say we have our first demand curve, which this actually won't change through our process. And then we're going to put this here for supply. So first off, right away, they're going to ask you, and this very well could be an FRQ type question. If not, it could be some type of multiple choice where it may give you some letters as you've seen. But right now, without doing anything differently, there is no tax at this point. What is our consumer and producer surplus? Well, our consumer surplus is this area because this is our equilibrium price and this is our equilibrium quantity. So right now the market has agreed to produce and make at these two goods and services. Okay, so, or not two goods and services, but this good at this price and this quantity, right? So this person up here specifically was willing to pay whatever this dollar amount was. And if you would look down, they paid this amount. So this would be their consumer surplus. This person was willing to pay a different dollar amount, but they went down and paid this price. So this person was willing to pay, but they did pay. Willing to pay, 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 did pay. This person wanted to pay down here, but nobody sold it to them. So they actually did not purchase anything. So anybody beyond this intersection did not make a purchase. So this area here is our consumer surplus. Okay, that area there is our consumer surplus. And then if we look at this area here, this consumer specifically was willing to sell it at this lower price, but people actually paid this price. So they have a producer surplus. This producer was willing to sell it there, but they sold it here. This person was willing to sell it here. They sold it there. Willing to sell, did sell. Willing to sell, did sell. Willing to sell it here, did sell it. Willing to sell it there, did. Willing to sell it, did. Willing to sell it at a higher price, did not have anybody willing to buy it at that price. So therefore, they didn't sell it. So this area here is going to be our producer surplus. Okay, that's going to be our producer surplus. So again, we can see consumer and producer surplus are huge concepts that's going to play a role. But now what happens if we enter in the big bad tax curve, right? So let's draw a new one so we can kind of bounce back and forth to make sure we can see it. So here's our demand curve. Here's our supply curve, S1. Government just says, boy, we need to start getting a little tax revenue. We notice this good or service is really popular, whatever it may be. And they come out and they say, we're going to implement a per unit tax on this good or service. Okay, a per unit tax. Again, guys, stop me in the comments if you have a question or if there's something you need here. So we got a per unit tax. So what the tax curve is going to look like is we're going to have a proposed tax curve here. So this is going to be our S tax curve. Okay, our S tax curve. This is where they're proposing that we end up putting the tax at. This is the amount. So the one thing that is going to happen here is you are going to be asked at some point in time, I can almost guarantee it, you're going to be asked to say, well, how much of this is the tax, or what is the tax amount? Okay. And what you need to know for the tax amount is it's the vertical distance between the two supply curves. So it's this point here all the way up to this point. It's the vertical distance. So choose any quantity. So if we go from the equilibrium, just choose this equilibrium quantity and go straight up. And that distance there, from here to here, is your tax amount. This will absolutely pop up on the AP test. I almost guarantee it. They're going to ask you. So you can choose it anywhere. So this vertical distance to this vertical distance. This distance here is the tax. This distance here is the tax. It is a vertical distance between the two curves. So in this case, it may say, well, how much of this was the tax? How much of this, or how much is the tax? Well, let's go with the actual equilibrium quantity now that we're going to have. Okay, so this is our equilibrium quantity with the tax. So this is going to be QT with the tax. Now, there's two things you need to know about this as well. We have the intersection of our original supply curve. This is actually going to be important to us because this is what the producers are going to receive after the tax. So this is the price after the tax for our sellers, and I'm going to call it suppliers or sellers here. And they aren't going to actually ask you to label this, but to keep it simple here. And then this intersection up here is the new price of the good or service. Okay, this is the new price. Okay, so this is going to be P2. Okay, well, looking at this graph, we now have a couple things to consider here. First thing is we need to know what is our producer surplus and our consumer surplus, the last that. Well, let's say that, let's extend these out all the way, make it easier to see it. Let's say that this person specifically was willing to pay, they did pay. They're not down in here because they didn't pay this amount. They actually have to pay the intersection of S tax and our demand curve. So they paid this amount. Willing to pay, did pay, willing to pay, did pay, all the way down. This area here is our consumer surplus. Okay. And then we got to figure out, okay, well, this producer, we have to go back to the original supply curve because this isn't the firm. This curve is not the firm. The firm is here. The firm is the one that still wants to produce at this line. Unfortunately, the government stepped in and said, well, this is where you're going to produce. So this person here was willing to sell it for that price, and they sold it for this price. Again, they sold it up here, but the government stuck their nose in, and they're actually going to what? They're going to say, this is what you are going to get out of the sale. So willing to sell it, did sell it, willing to sell, did sell, willing to sell, did sell, willing to sell, did sell, all the way up in this area here is our producer surplus. Okay, so that leaves us with a couple boxes here. We have this area here. We have this area here. We have the area as a whole, and then we have this triangle here. Okay, well, let's talk about the area, the giant area here. Well, this is no longer consumer surplus. This is no longer producer surplus. In here, this was the original producer. This was the original consumer. So now we're looking at the idea of the tax revenue. Okay, and this area here, let's go with a green, because green says taxes. This area here is our tax revenue box. So if we identified this to here, this gap here as being the price of the tax, or the cost of the tax, it's going to line up to this and this, right? So it's between P2, our new price, intersection of S tax and D1, and now down to where the producer, which is at the supply curve, the original supply curve, where the producer is going to be willing to pay. Okay, so this gap here is our new tax amount. So again, just like anything else, length times width, well, this is the tax quantity that's going to be sold. So this is our total tax revenue. Total tax revenue. So Caitlin, I'm answering your question here. So who is going to pay what portion of the tax? Well, keep in mind this here, if we go back a page, this whole thing, once upon a time, was consumer surplus. Well, now it's just this little box here. So what did we lose? Well, we lost this area here that used to be a part of consumer surplus. So the consumers are going to pay this portion of the tax. Now, why I didn't include this triangle? Well, we're not producing beyond this quantity. This is the quantity we're at. So this is the original consumer surplus. They no longer get to keep that money because they have to pay the higher amount. So this part of their surplus goes to the government in the form of tax. Okay, this is how the government decides who's going to pay what portion of the tax. And then producers, notice again, if we go back a page, producers used to hang out in this area here. Well, that's not the case anymore. Okay, that's not the case anymore because the producers are now this box here or this triangle here. So we now have the producers paying this portion of the tax. So this is for the producers. Okay, that's for the producers. So in this case, consumers would pay this box, producers would pay this box, and then we have this triangle out here, which I think you've all figured out at some point here. It used to be a part of our conversation because our consumer and producer surplus went all the way to the equilibrium quantity. It no longer does. So this area is because of that government involvement. This is going to be the dead weight loss. Okay, so that's dead weight loss. Okay. House taxes. Freaking out? Feeling good? Does that help? Do we feel more confident with taxes, maybe? One other thing, again, just respond to my questions here. That way I have an idea of how you guys feel about these things. But if we see that the demand curve is more elastic or inelastic, this is a very common question here. Okay, so I'm going to bounce over one more screen and I'm going to draw this tax curve really quickly here. So we've got our demand, we have supply. Okay, and then we have our S tax here, which is not going to change. So let's assume that these things do not change on us, but the demand curve is going to change. And let's just see what happens here. So this is our new intersection. So this here is going to be our tax boxes. So this is consumer portion, producer portion. And I know I'm going quick here, but I want to make sure you understand this concept here. So if we take this demand curve and just pivot along this point here, we pivot at the equilibrium. So we're not changing the equilibrium. We're really just adjusting the slope of the demand curve by making it more elastic. So let's just pivot on that point there. And let's say we draw a more elastic curve like this. So this is demand, and we're going to say more elastic. This is the demand curve. So again, the thing that we want to notice here is we've just pivoted on this. So actually our S tax curve stays the same. Our supply curve stays the same, but now our demand curve is here. So now our intersection of S tax is here. Our original equilibrium is still there. And then we go down to our supply curve. So now this is our new tax revenue box divided by this line. What has happened to the consumer's portion of the tax? It's really small now. What's happened to the producer's portion of the tax? Yep, it's this big portion here. Okay, so the more elastic producers are going to pay a much larger portion of that tax. Okay. And this is largely because people are going to be like, well, all right, that's fine. You can change the price, increase the price. I really don't care because it's an elastic good. It's a luxury good. It's something that I really don't need. So whatever, move on, right? So that's the concept there with elastic. Well, let's go back a moment here and let's move this curve and make it more inelastic. So I'm going to take again that same point. We're going to go inelastic. Again, we still have this supply curve. We still have the S tax curve. So now our new intersection is here. Again, it's important to keep this equilibrium still original here. And then we're going to go down to the supply curve, which is here. So now that's the intersection. We got to go up. So this is what your tax revenue would look like. That box there with the division. Notice what happened. Yeah, our consumers are now paying a huge portion while the producers are paying a smaller portion. So the more inelastic, the more that our consumers will pay of the tax. Does that help everyone? Does that bring a little clarity to the taxes and how that works? Hopefully that's a good review for you as far as the taxes. That's your tax curves. Yeah, good. Seems like that's good help. Good. So let's talk again. We're going to move into unit 3, and this unit is fun. This unit is straight up nasty. It's not a nice person. It's not a good person. But just deep breath. Deep breath. When we're talking about perfect competition and we're talking about cost of production, it's all about memorizing or understanding the basic facts that are not going to change with the information. So when they say profit maximizing, it means something. And that's really going to be important through the conversation. So I'm going to draw the perfect competition graph, but you got to help me out with some Q&A here, because I don't know what you guys aren't necessarily understanding with the perfect competition. So I want to make sure I hit those things. So when we're done tonight, maybe we can be like, oh, that makes sense. Perfect competition is not as bad as I once thought it was. So let's go ahead and get right back into it. So I'm going to do the perfect competition graph. And I want to make sure you understand how to draw a perfectly competitive market and firm. Okay. And what's important is whenever we're doing a perfect competition, we got to understand the basic characteristics, which we know the basic characteristics are what? Large market, lots and lots of people, easy entry and exit into the market so people can come and go as they please. When we're talking about a perfectly competitive market, it's probably going to have no barriers to entry. And then we're going to be price takers. We're definitely going to be price takers. We're going to be identified as taking the price that the market sets up. So let's draw this side by side. We're going to draw the market. Hope everybody had a good day at school, by the way. Missed a lot of you guys today with the Lang tests. Heard it wasn't too bad. Heard you guys were pretty exhausted, though. Hopefully you've got enough energy to finish strong this week. So here's our graph. We got Q. We got price. We got price here for the firm. We got Q. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, again, right back into supply and demand. So we've got our demand curve downward sloping to the right. We've got our supply curve upward sloping to the right. We have our equilibrium, price and quantity. And then we're going to take the information that we've gathered here from the market, and it's going to determine what our firm looks like. So we're going to take this price, and actually what I'm going to do, that's my apologies, it really should be QM for the market. If you're doing this with me here, if we're really talking AP, they're going to tell you that it's the PM and QM for the market. So we're going to take this price and we're going to extend it out and prove that we are price takers. Check that, price takers. And we're going to put PM here. This concept here actually may get you a point on an FRQ. Okay. It's really likely that you're going to see something perfect competition in the FRQ. I would say it's either going to be that or monopoly. Those are probably your first question for the FRQs. You may get yourself an easy point by labeling this PM. Okay, that's important. Now over here, we want to identify this as marginal revenue as well. We know it's the Mr. DARP curve, so that means it's also equal to demand, average revenue, and price. We've already kind of identified price here, and we don't really use average revenue all that often, but again, it's important for some of the concepts. So we've got our downward sloping and then upward sloping marginal cost curve. And then from here, it's really dependent on what they say. If they say this is going to be long run equilibrium, we know that the ATC is going to come down. It's going to hit its minimum here. It's going to bounce back up, and this is going to be your ATC. This is a perfectly competitive market in the long run. Okay, and the important component here is I don't even have to say long run equilibrium, because if we're in the long run, we're assuming we're working back to equilibrium. So this is perfect competition in the long run. Equilibrium is probably important to say, but again, if they leave it out, don't necessarily shy away from the fact that you probably know ATC equals MR equals price. Whew. Big time here, right? ATC equals MR equals price. Just went one too far though. Equals price. Absolutely crucial, you know this, and which is what I was going to say a second ago, and it's equal to MC. This is the granddaddy of them all, right? This is why we know that perfect competition is both allocatively efficient because supply equals demand, and we know it's productively efficient because we're operating at ATC's minimum. And that's productive efficiency, and then that's allocative efficiency. So this is why perfect competition is so good. So yeah, I would definitely say this is going to be a major concept within our conversation. And I'm seeing that Alyssa says that Mr. Clifford predicted that this is going to be the FRQ number one, and I would say most likely as well. And looking at it, it is, I think the last 7 years, like 4 or 5 of the times it's been perfect competition. Okay. It's the most popular graph that they want to do because they can do a lot with it. Okay. So this is long run, major concept. Okay. How are we doing with long run? Everybody feel all right with long run? Because we're going to change this and we're going to make this, into the concept here. If we look at a loss versus a profit. Okay, a loss versus a profit. Ooh, I like that lead. Yeah, or live, sorry. I don't know that his predictions are as good as my snow day predictions, but I'm a pretty firm believer in Mr. Clifford. It would be nice. And Alyssa, if you know what he predicted for 2 and 3, that would be nice too. So but yeah, so this is a firm operating at long run equilibrium. If it's going to be a profit, I'm going to draw it again here, but I'm going to go quick here. So this is our market. Demand, supply. We go equilibrium, price, and quantity. And then this is the firm. Again, you're going to want to make sure you label everything. I'm trying to go quick, but let's not be sloppy, right? So we're going to be price. See? Should probably do PM. What's nice is they're going to tell you exactly what they want it labeled, but we're going to be PM because we're price takers here. So we're going to use the market price. So this is going to be our MR curve. It's also equal to demand. Okay. This is our marginal cost curve. From here, it's kind of important to just draw in your quantity for the firm because this is going to help you determine how you want to draw your profit or loss. So in this case, it would be a profit. So we want to make sure that the ATC at MR equals MC, which is here, we want to make sure the ATC is below the intersection of this. So we have our quantity already set. So as long as our ATC falls below this and somewhere down in here, we'll be okay. Now, again, when we draw it, let's make sure our ATC hits, actually, I'm going to go red. Let's make sure our ATC hits its minimum at the MC. Absolutely important. That is a point on the FRQ. Okay, so now all we have to do is go at this quantity. Everything is based off of this quantity now. Okay, life will never be the same anywhere else than this quantity. Okay, now some people, and I don't want to go too crazy here, but some people are wondering, because on the test, a lot of times they ask, well, what happens if this firm increases the quantity? Welcome, Ange. What happens if this firm increases the quantity? Well, if we increase the quantity, what are we actually doing? We're decreasing our total revenue. We're actually increasing, well, the total revenue is increasing because we're moving along here, but we're decreasing the profit because we're increasing our cost in comparison to the total revenue. Okay, so if we are going to move right, if we increase our quantity here, we're actually not in a good place. Because why? Well, let's see here. If we were to choose another quantity just out in here, and we go up, okay, we're like, well, let's just produce here. That would be cool. Well, here's our marginal cost. Here's our marginal revenue. You're telling me the most recent product we produced, it cost us more than it was that we got in return. So our costs were greater than our revenue. That is not intelligent. Okay. So again, they'll ask you what happens if we increase our quantity, what happens if we decrease our quantity in this case. Well, let's first draw in our profit here. So we're going to use this quantity back to this conversation. We're going to use this quantity. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to intersect the ATC here. So this is our ATC amount. Notice it does not correlate with ATC's minimum. I'm going to redraw that dotted line just sure you realize that I'm actually slightly above that minimum. Right? Slightly above the minimum. It has everything to do with this intersection here. And then this whole area all the way over, including that little box and up there, that's going to be our profit. Okay. If they ask you to shade it in completely, shade it in completely. Okay. So that's profit. Again, I like to do the MR and MC first, figure out your quantity, and then draw in your ATC. So let's go one more here. Boom. We got market. Supply and demand. Let me know questions that you have, guys. I saw per unit versus lump sum on the graph. I can do that for sure. Keep the questions coming. That'll help. This is our equilibrium price and quantity, PE. I didn't do it this time. I recognize it. Come on. Come on. Why are you not undoing? Okay. PM for market. QM for market. We're going to take the price over here. So this is PM. We're price takers. MR. Demand. MC. Cool beans. Intersection. QF for the firm's quantity. Now we're going to be producing at a loss. There's two things that we want to do here. When we're doing a loss, we want to make sure, A, that the ATC's intersection is going to be above, right? So we're going to extend that quantity up. So as long as our ATC's intersection with the quantity is above price, we're going to have a loss. But also we're going to want to draw in the average variable cost curve because of the shutdown rule. So let's take a look here. Here's our ATC. We're going to go down. We do not rebound here. We go all the way to the MC curve. Back up. ATC. Here is going to be our intersection of quantity. So we're going to go up. There's our intersection of our ATC. Missed it just a little bit. There we go. So this box here is going to be our loss. And then again, if we're asked to draw in our AVC minimum, back up AVC, as long as AVC's minimum is below the price, then we're going to keep operating. Okay. Do we understand why we operate? This was a multiple choice question. Many a times looking back, what are we actually covering in our loss here? So when we have a loss and we are still operating, this loss, our total revenue box is this box here. So let's go back to green. So our total revenue box is this area here. Our total revenue box is there. So let's talk about what we're actually covering here, because this component here, this is the loss. This is what we're not covering. This area here is what we've got covered. So the reason we're operating is, well, at this intersection here, this box is what? This box is what? That is our average variable cost, or our total variable cost. That is the variable cost. They are always covered if we're operating at a loss. This box here, this box here is our total cost box. Well, we did not cover all of it. We covered some of our total costs. This area was covered. AVC was covered, but this area here was not covered. This is what our loss is. What is that? Well, the gap between, well, let's back up here. ATC equals what? AVC, which we have, AVC plus AFC. AFC is where? AFC is here. So part of our AFC was covered, not all of it. So our fixed costs have not been covered. Okay. This gap here is our fixed cost, and only some of the fixed costs have been covered. Now, why wouldn't this firm shut down though? Because they're operating at a loss. Well, if we decided to shut down, this whole thing is our loss, because our fixed costs we have to pay regardless if we're producing or not. So we have lost all of this if we decide to shut down. But because smart, we decide to stay open, and now this is our loss. Notice how much smaller that is. It's because we paid some of our fixed costs off, but not all of them. Okay. Cool beans. Very cool. Very cool. All right. Any other questions with the perfect competition before I get into the tax curves? Alyssa, I see that we've got number 2, supply and demand, which that'd be awesome. With elasticity, if you guys want to do a little bit elasticity, that'd be all right. That'd be all right. I'd be okay with elasticity stuff. If you guys are craving a little elasticity. And then number 3 is MR and MRC, which is the labor market, and the idea of producing as long as our marginal revenue product is greater than our marginal resource cost, or you may see it as marginal factor cost. So those are both good as well. I would say let's be prepared for externalities as well. I have a feeling externalities may play a role as well. Okay. Okay, we'll do some labor market. We can do some elasticity. Those are good. We feel all right with the Furman market and perfect competition. Is this making sense? Are you guys gaining stuff from here? Or am I just doing too much review, too much obvious? I don't want to waste anybody's time. I think, one of the things is I want to make sure that I'm covering some of the basics but I don't want to go too much in depth in areas that you're like, dude, come on, for crying out loud, we've covered this a million times. But I want to make sure maybe if you didn't understand it before, maybe I can hit it again. Let's talk a little bit about those curves then when we talk about taxes in the firm. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about here. I'm not going to draw the market. We're gonna step away from the market. We're just going to focus on the firm right now. So this is going to be our marginal revenue curve. This is for you, Billy. So our marginal revenue curve, and then we have MC. And actually, I'm going to draw in a curve we have not done much of here. This is going to be our average fixed cost curve. Okay, our average fixed cost curve. I'm glad you guys are getting something out of this, which is good. Average fixed cost curve. Let's skip the AVC for the moment. Shoot, let's draw it. Let's keep our cost curves in blue. AVC minimum and ATC minimum. Not a perfect replica. This gap here should actually be an asymptote. Those should be getting closer and closer. For that. So those are asymptotes. You guys are welcome, man. This is what I love doing. So I appreciate you guys logging on. We got 8 people, which is cool. I know some people are getting off work at 9, so I'm really happy that you guys are here. So hopefully we can learn something from all this. Let's look here. Calvin's in bed. No, sorry for Calvin. So if we have a lump sum, let's just think for a moment with lump sum here. What does lump sum even mean? Lump sum basically is saying that you're getting all of it at the same time, which could be in the beginning, most likely in the beginning. So what is that going to actually change? What is that going to change? Well, if we're getting it all at the same time, what is the one thing that we know? And this is an important concept for cost of production. At 0 units, so if we're producing 0 units, there's 2 things that are absolutely true. Our total cost is equal to our fixed costs, and our variable cost is equal to 0. And that's because at this production of 0 units, we're not actually producing anything, so we have not bought any resources and materials. All we've bought is basically what our fixed cost is considered, and then that just becomes our total cost at 0 units. So if we get a lump sum tax, what is that going to do to our variable costs? Well, it's not going to do anything to our variable cost because our variable cost at 0 units before we produce is 0. Nothing's going to happen. What it's going to do is it's going to increase our fixed costs. So all the lump sum's going to do is it's going to raise our fixed. Let me do it in a different color. Maybe that'll help. It's going to raise our fixed cost curve up. Okay, so this is our new average fixed cost curve. We'll call that 2. It's going to increase our average fixed cost curve, which also does what? It's going to increase our total cost curve. So then our ATC is going to be like this. Okay, that's a horrible, horrible ATC. Okay, so it's going to look like that. Now, not to confuse you with all these different lines, what a crazy graph we got going on here, but what we've noticed is what? What's happened? Well, guess what, folks? We're still always going to produce that. MR equals MC. So if we have a lump sum, does it change our quantity? No. Our quantity will be the same. Quantity is going to be the same. Does it change our price? No. The quantity is the same. The price is the same. It really has no effect on our graph. So hopefully that makes sense with the lump sum, because all it's going to do is it's going to increase our fixed costs, and then it's going to increase our total cost. But our average variable we have not produced yet. So we're hanging out here. And our marginal cost, this isn't going to change our per unit costs. This is essentially just changing our end costs, which notice we did do what? Some people say, well, then why do we even cover this? Well, we've actually went from making a profit to making a loss here by the shifting of the ATC. So a lump sum can move you into the negative profit or into a loss, or it's definitely going to decrease your profit, but it's not going to change the output. It's not going to change our output because our marginal cost curve does not shift. Okay, let's back up then. Okay, so now we're talking about doing a per unit. Okay, so per unit here, again, at 0 units, our fixed cost is already set. It's going to be the same. It's not going to change. So it's not going to touch our fixed costs. So our fixed cost is going to remain the same at all times here. So what is it going to change? Well, as we go to 1 unit, now we have a variable cost. Now we have a variable cost. So once we have a variable cost, now we're going to see where this actually plays a role. So what's going to happen is this is going to increase our per unit costs. It's going to increase everything. So what are we going to do? We're going to see our marginal cost curve actually shift. And this is going to be the component here that's important. Okay, our marginal cost curve is going to shift. Our ATC is going to shift up. Our AVC is going to shift up. But I just want to focus on the MC for a moment, because this is really the question that we're going to get is, if we have the intersection of MR and MC here, this is QE or QF. And now we're producing where? MR2 equals, MR equals MC2. MC2. So in this case, our quantity has done what? It's decreased. Okay, it's decreased. So this is important for you to understand when dealing with per unit versus lump sum. Now, the nice thing is subsidies are done the exact same way, only we're shifting to the right rather than the left. So let me know if that makes sense, if that helped out, Billy, and then everybody else as well, if that makes sense with that in terms of the price changing and whatnot. Okay, because again, this is a per unit tax on the firm. It's not on the market. Okay, now if we went to the market and we did a per unit tax on the market, well, what would that do? If we did a per unit tax on the market, we would see that we're actually going to increase the price. Because we're price takers, all that would do in the per unit in the market, it would essentially just raise our price overall. But when we're operating here, when we're operating within the firm, we're actually just looking at the idea that the per unit tax is placed on the firm, so they have to pay for it, which means our quantity is going to go down. So what does a lump sum do? This is like saying, hey, we have a one-time fee for opening up a business. A one-time fee. It's a registration fee to become an LLC. It's a $100 fine, not fine, but fee. Once you become an LLC, we've covered that, so your $100 is paid for, and you never have to pay for it again. That's why it's a fixed cost. Or if it's a lump sum subsidy, it's like, hey, if you open up a business that uses solar panels and you decide you're going to do solar panels, we'll give you a $500 credit, tax credit, or a $500 refund check, or a $500 check just because you did it. And then you'll never get another dime from that subsidy. But they're like, hey, thanks for putting in solar panels. Here's $500. And then as you increase and decrease output, nothing's going to change because that $500 is not dispersed per unit. It's a one-time thing. Okay. What else do you guys want to know about those? There is one thing that's important here. Since we're on this, I am going to jump to another concept just briefly, because I want you to know what happens with a lump sum, or I'm sorry, not a lump sum, but a per unit when we're talking about a monopoly. Okay, so, and again, we'll talk about monopolies later if you want to, but I want to make sure that you understand in a perfect competition, what happens to price with a per unit tax? Nothing. Price does not change, right? Quantity is going to decrease in a perfect competition, okay, with a per unit tax. But when we go to a monopoly, keep in mind we have a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. Okay. Yes, Caitlin, it is just the reverse for for a per unit subsidy, you're going to shift the marginal cost curve to the right. Okay, you're going to shift the marginal cost curve to the right, which means your output's going to increase. Your price is going to stay the same. Okay. But looking at it here, if we have this marginal cost curve, again, we produce at MR equals MC. Here's MC. This is going to be our price up, right? So our price is up to the demand curve. So this is the price of the monopoly. This is the quantity for the monopoly. Okay. If we shift this marginal cost curve to the left, up and some, this marginal cost curve will then look like this. Wow, way to hit your arrows. Let's back up. That's embarrassing. Let's hit our marginal cost curve here, right? So marginal cost 2. Notice what's happened. We are still going to produce where? MR equals MC. But our price actually does something too. Our price is going to increase. So PM2, price goes up. QM2, quantity decreases. Okay. So when we do this, understand from monopoly, it has 2 effects. This is, again, a per unit tax. Okay. Again, the lump sum subsidy and the lump sum tax, they have no effect on price or quantity. They may change your profit, but they're not going to affect our per unit, or I'm sorry, our price or quantity, which is really what DAP is going to ask you. You're going to say, well, does the quantity increase, decrease, or stay the same? Does price increase, decrease, or stay the same? And then you'll be able to answer, because if you have a per unit tax for monopoly, the price is going to go up and the quantity is going to decrease. Okay. For a perfect competition, the price is going to stay the same because we're price takers, and then the quantity is going to decrease. Okay. So I'm gonna skip elasticity for a moment. I know that's something somebody would ask for. Let's see here. Kind of got away from the comments here. Elasticity. I'm going to go to externalities in the labor market, just to make sure we understand those things. Keep the questions coming, please. How are we doing out there? You guys surviving here at 9:22? We got about 40 minutes left. If you need something, please let me know. Those of you that just showed up, let me know who you be. I want to know who's here with us today, or tonight. Economics at 9:30 at night. You guys are absolutely nerds, and I love you for it. So let's talk a little bit about, what do you guys want to do? Externalities, and then maybe get into the MRP and MRC. Let's do externalities real quick. I feel like there was one thing, though, that somebody, market please, ditto, agree, and or externalities. Let's do externalities because it's going to go quickly. I think externalities, I think people freak out just for the fact that we don't talk a whole lot about it. It's a short unit, it's a short section. So people kind of get a little worked up. So let's just talk quickly here about positive externalities. Got to put it in there. I'm only an hour past my bedtime, by the way. Feeling pretty good. Pretty good. This is an N. All right. So positive externalities. Let's go ahead. Are they a major concept on the exam? Yes and no. You're probably going to get maybe 2, 3, 4 multiple choice, right? You're going to get some. It's going to be a major concept in the fact that it could be an FRQ. Okay, and I want to make sure we understand externalities. You are definitely going to get at least 2 to 4 multiple choice. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Probably one will be a definition. Okay, and then probably one will be interpreting a graph. Okay, but if it ends up being an FRQ, which to the last 3 years it has been an FRQ, maybe 2 in the last 4 years, It's been an FRQ. You want to make sure you get those 6 points. Major problem if you don't. So we want to make sure we're prepared for it. So positive externality, all you have to really know, so simple, okay? We have supply and demand just dealing with the concept of marginal social benefit and marginal social cost. So society wants to make sure that any decision we make as a society, the marginal social benefit is equal to the marginal social cost. So we'll continue to implement more and more public goods, or we'll continue to implement more and more things as long as our marginal social benefit, we're gaining more benefits than it is costing us. Okay, as long as that's the case, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep putting in more streetlights, whatever it may be. We're going to keep vaccinating people. We're going to keep whatever it may be. So as long as marginal social benefit is greater than MSC, the marginal social cost, we're going to keep producing and increasing production. And then when they equal, which is like supply and demand equaling, that's when we're going to actually produce at that point. Okay, that's how we figure out quantity, is when these two equal. But what happens is the benefit that we receive as a society, marginal social benefit, the amount that we receive as a society does not always equal what we're actually paying for. So, for example, in this case, we're going to do what's called the marginal private cost. Marginal private cost. This is what we pay for flu shots or a vaccine. This is the, I'm saying cost and I meant to say benefit. Sorry. Marginal private benefit, right? So this is what we're going to get from a flu shot, from a vaccination, from education. This is the benefit we're going to receive by purchasing that good. However, guess what? We also have, let's put in the marginal social cost real quick. Sorry. Marginal social cost. This is how much it costs society for those flu shots. Okay. And that could be per unit. It could be whatever it is that you want in terms of how you're thinking it through here. But it's a total societal cost. Okay. So it could be, how much it is for all the resources, materials, whatever. I don't want to get into that part, but it's the idea of what society is paying, right? So we're gaining the private benefit and we're paying the social cost. But here's the thing. When we get a flu shot, other people are benefiting from it. That is not included in the benefit we're receiving here. People are actually getting more and more benefits from this that we do not account for. And that is why we draw the marginal social benefit curve. Because if I'm not getting the flu, then I'm not infecting other people, right? If I'm not getting polio, I'm not giving other people polio, which I don't even know if that's contagious. That could be a silly thing. I don't know anything about polio. Sorry. But the idea is we are looking at the concept that we really, as a society, we should be saying that our benefit is way out here, which means what? Because it's not necessarily that, oh, we're not benefiting enough. It's this concept up here that our marginal social benefit is what? Supposed to be equal to our marginal social cost. So it's really about the quantity. So the quantity that we're currently producing at is here. This is the quantity of the free market. But the fact that we gain a lot more benefit than what our private consumer is suggesting they get is suggesting that we should really be producing here what is socially optimal. We should be producing out at socially optimal. Okay. Now, here's what's important though. Do you see any arrows saying that I shifted this curve? No, we do not see arrows here because this is not a shift. This is not a shift. This is a suggestion saying, hey, this is where we're actually really gaining our benefit out in here. So what do we have? We have a deadweight loss. Our deadweight loss is equal to, if we take our quantity up, this is the area of deadweight loss, which is saying that we should be producing at that point, right? Just like an arrow. We should be producing there, but we're not. Because again, we're not shifting this curve. Now, how do we fix this? Well, right now our MSB is greater, right? Here's our MSB. MSB is greater than our MPB at QFM. We really want to be out in here where MSB equals MSC, which would be the quantity of socially optimal. So what would we do? We would implement a per unit subsidy. A per unit subsidy, which then, and only then, we would shift our MPB over to MSB. And this would say, hey, if you get a flu shot, we're going to give you a $10 rebate. We're going to pass it on to the consumer, get more people excited about getting their flu shots, entice them a little bit more. So therefore, more people are going to go. Because, oh, by the way, MSC is equal to supply, and MSB is equal to demand. Right? So the idea is we really should be where supply equals demand, which is why this is socially optimal. Is that making sense? I feel like I rambled a little bit. Is that making sense? How are we doing out there? Negative externalities. Same exact concept. I'll go a little bit quicker here so we can get to other questions you guys have. Fantastico. Good. Good. Really should be a green. I like green, but whatevs. All right, so we have our marginal social benefit in this case. We have our marginal private cost in this case. So now we have something like smoking cigarettes. Okay, so we have cigarettes. So in this case, our marginal private cost is here. Our marginal private cost is there because this is what the consumer is paying for cigarettes, and this is how much they're buying. This is the benefit we receive from cigarettes. So this is the free market operating as they do. So this is the price. We don't often talk about the price as much because it's really about the quantity and the fact that we're underproducing or overproducing. And in this case, we're actually overproducing because with cigarettes, this person's like, yeah, I'm going to get lung cancer, blah, blah. But what's happening really is anybody that's standing around while you're smoking is also getting lung cancer or secondhand lung cancer, secondhand smoke. They're cleaning up your cigarette butts. They're dealing with the air pollution that you're causing. So really, in the end, society is actually paying a larger cost. So this is the social cost. This is the marginal social cost. So in this case, our society is overproducing because we should be where MB equals MSC, which this is the quantity of socially optimal because this is our supply, this is our demand. So this is the quantity of socially optimal quantity. So actually we are underproducing. I'm sorry, we're overproducing. We should be producing less because the costs are too great. So where is our deadweight loss? Well, this is the quantity. We go up. And then this area here is the deadweight loss because this is where society wants to produce versus where it is producing. Okay, so the deadweight loss is there. Now, a couple key concepts here, okay, real quick. If you ever see MPC, you immediately know what? Negative externality. If you ever see MPB, it's going to be positive externality. Okay, it's going to be positive externality. Very important. Okay, that's how you can tell if it's a negative or positive externality, is if you see MPB, positive externality, because we have a private benefit. We're not considering the social benefit for the entire society. MPC, oh, it's a private cost, but we're not considering the societal cost of that negative externality. Okay. Furthermore, a negative externality, we are overproducing. We're overproducing because we're here and we should be here. Positive externality, we're underproducing because we're producing here when we should be here. Okay. If we increase, if we add this per unit subsidy, what happens to deadweight loss? Gone, because now we're producing where society wants. Over here, what would we implement? We would implement a per unit tax. Per unit tax. If we implement the per unit tax, what happens to our deadweight loss? It's Mahatma Gandhi, no longer. Okay? Negative externalities. How do we do? You guys feel a little bit better about negative externalities? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Solid McCoy. You're my favorite tuna. All right, what's the next question you guys have? What's next? What are you guys most concerned with leading into this? Looking at your questions here. I see elasticity. Labor markets. You guys interested in some labor markets? Is that going to help you out? Labor markets. I see Caitlin is thinking labor markets. I'm okay with labor markets. The challenge with labor markets is that most of what they're going to ask you for the labor markets, I'm trying to move up in my chair. That's why I look like I'm headbanging. The labor market, a lot of it's going to be done in charts. They're not going to do a ton of graphs. Okay. Now, with that being said, Mr. Clifford thinks I'm on board with him, but he thinks we're going to have an MRP and MRC, which tells me it's probably going to be a chart, not a graph, based on the fact that he says MRP, MRC, not a perfectly competitive labor market. The challenge is we would have to find some type of chart to make sense of it all. But we certainly can. Let me see here. Let me draw you a perfectly competitive labor market real quick. So we have the market. We'll end with a monopolistically competitive firm graph. How's that? That's what we'll end with. So here's our market. This is for a perfectly competitive labor market. So important components here that we have to understand is we're wage takers. We're wage takers. Okay. So who demands labor? We have demand for labor. Firms will demand labor. We have supply for labor. We supply the labor. So this is our equilibrium wage. This is our equilibrium wage. And this is going to be the quantity of labor equilibrium here. Okay. Because we're wage takers, we're just going to take this. We're going to continue to call this the wage market or the wage equilibrium, probably going to be the wage for the market. So again, just to stay consistent, the AP is going to tell you what to label it. But this is the wage market because we're wage takers. We're going to go across. So then this is going to be here. This is the wage that we're going to be paying people. So this is going to be our MRC. This is the cost of hiring people. Okay. And the fact of the matter is, guess what? We're supplying labor, but we got to take the price that they give us, right? That we have to take the wage. Okay. So this is going to be our supply for labor curve. And this is the marginal resource cost. By the way, marginal resource cost is just basically how much it costs additionally to hire one more person. Well, if we're all paid the same wage, our marginal resource cost is also going to be what? A horizontal line. Okay. And then we got to draw in our last one, which is going to be our MRP curve, our marginal revenue product. And it's going to go up and then down because of law of diminishing marginal returns, right? So this is going to be our marginal revenue product curve, and it's going to be equal to the demand for labor. Okay. And why is that the demand for labor? Well, notice I'm going to want to keep hiring people as long as they are increasing my total revenue, right? So they're increasing. Anything above the MRC curve is increasing the total revenue. And I'm going to keep hiring them because this worker here brought in an additional revenue that it did not cost me, right? So this is how much it cost me. This is how much they brought in. Up here, this is how much they brought in. This is how much it cost me, how much it brought in, how much it cost me, how much it brought in, how much it cost me, how much it brought in, how much it cost me. Here, this intersection, that's how much it brought in and how much it cost me there. Equal. If I were to hire one more, it cost me here and they only brought in this. So I'm actually losing money. So that's why we hire as long as MRP is greater than MRC. So this is going to be the quantity of labor for the firm. It's an F. We're going to do labor for the firm. Okay. So this is your labor market for a perfectly competitive market. You're going to produce as long as MRP is greater than MRC. Okay. Major concept there. Okay. You guys feel good about that? Monopsony, you're probably going to see one graph. I'm not really concerned with it. Okay. Monopsony, I'm not trying to dodge that, but we are running out of time. Monopsony, just understand it's the complete opposite of a monopoly. So we've got our increasing supply for labor, what we're willing to supply. Our MRC is here. And then our marginal revenue product is here. We're going to produce where MRP equals MRC. The big key is what? This is not our wage. That is not our wage. We got to go down to the supply for labor, right? So this is our wage there. This is going to be our quantity. Okay. This is the quantity of labor. That's our wage. So it's the same exact concept as a monopoly. The only question you're going to be asked for monopsony is where is the quantity and where is the wage? That's it. That's basically all you're going to be asked from monopsony. Not a big deal. If you fail that one question, it's okay. Now, you should get it though. It's pretty easy. So I would want you to get it. That way we can keep that going. Okay. All right. Each, if we're talking about the labor market, this is going to be all about understanding the concepts. I'm trying to look through some questions here, so give me a moment here. So yeah, the big thing here is we want to make sure we understand the least cost rule and the concept that we are going to produce. We're going to keep hiring as long as that worker brings in enough money. So one of the important concepts is it may give you the marginal revenue product. It may give you the marginal product. We want to make sure we just understand we want to make sure we understand the concept that as long as that person brings in more money than it costs, we'll continue to hire them. Okay. And again, I'm trying to find a good example here. The issue is it's not as easy to find these things. This is why it's hard for me to draw this. So one of the things that you're going to see here is the combination of capital and the combination of labor. Okay, this is the least cost rule. This is easy stuff, but but not incredibly easy either because it's confusing at times. So what we want to make sure we do is that we take the costs. So we want to do the marginal. Let me see if I can pull up that formula for you. All right. So we're going to take the marginal physical product. Oh, come on, it's right there. This is, I don't go by the formula, which is the problem. All right, here we go. This is what I wanted. So we're going to take the marginal physical product divided by the marginal resource cost. Okay. So basically, what is the marginal product divided by the actual resource cost of it? So let's say we have two different goods here. Not two different goods, but we have labor and we have capital. Typically, K is capital. And then we have the marginal product. The labor is $4. And the capital is going to cost us $5. Okay. And then we know that the marginal physical product of labor is 20 and the marginal physical product of capital is 30. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make sure that we're going to minimize the cost here. So we want these to be equaled out. So if this is the last, this is how they're going to ask it. So if this is the last that is hired or the last marginal product. So we hired labor at $4. We hired capital at $5. The current level of output. So this is where we're at. What would we do? Should we increase or decrease production of labor? Should we increase or decrease production of capital? Well, we want these to equal each other. Okay. So the key here is that we want these to be equal to each other. Now, what's important is we are dealing with the idea of marginal returns here too. So we know the marginal physical product for this is going to go down. So that's going to be important. And we know the marginal physical product of this is also going to go down. Okay. So it also is going to go up here because of the law of diminishing returns. So this is the marginal product curve. So if we're operating here and we increase output, so again, this is like saying that we are producing 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, 2 units, 1 unit, right? So if we increase output, we're actually going to be working down this marginal product curve. So we're actually going to get less and less marginal physical product, right? We're going to get less. I hope that makes sense. If we decrease output and we go to 2 units, 1 unit, we're actually going to get more physical product out. That's going to be important for us because now our numbers are going to make sense. So what we want to do is do our marginal utility per dollar spent. If you remember utility maximization, well, that's what this is. We're doing our marginal physical product divided by the cost, right, of that product. So 20 divided by 4 is what? 5. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. So if this is where we're currently producing, this is our marginal physical product and marginal resource cost per dollar spent. So every dollar we spend, we're getting 5 products out of our labor. For every dollar we spend, we're getting 6 product out of our capital. Okay, we want these to equal. So in this case, what would we do? Well, we want to work towards 6 and we want to work towards 5. So if we increase our capital, notice I'm doing a downward arrow, but we're going from 3 to 4. If we increase our capital, we're getting closer to 5 because of the marginal product curve, right? Over here, we want to actually decrease production because we want to get closer to 6. So we're going to decrease our production maybe to 2. Okay. And again, we don't know what's going on per se, but this is the data we're given. So this number here is going to get larger. This number here is going to get smaller. So in that case, this firm would hire less workers and hire more capital, more robots. Whew. I hope that didn't confuse everybody there. How do we do? Does that make sense? That's a really tough concept, but if you just look, you're trying to get them to equal each other. Okay, so that's important to know in terms of that. Okay, so we want to make sure that they equal each other. I'm looking at some previous questions. And they're really around that very concept there. That's a popular concept that I'm seeing. Increase, decrease, increase, decrease. That's all it's really doing. So all you're looking at is dividing those. Wow, that's going to be easy for you, right? So just divide and just understand the concept. Will it always be both? It's a good question. Let me look. I think they're going to mix it up, but I'm pretty sure they're going to ask you to increase both, or I'm sorry, I think they're going to have you do both because, again, when we're oversimplifying, right? Yeah, it's going to have you do both. Okay, because again, we're oversimplifying, so we don't know for sure. Well, see, in this one, it's saying, well, nope, that's just labor only. That's why. Yeah, if you're combining two different resources, yeah, for sure. At least according to everything I've seen, yeah, yes, it will be both. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's finish with monopolistic competition. Let's take a look at that graph. Okay, so the nice thing is this is a price maker graph. Price, quantity. Demand curve is downward sloping to the right. Our marginal revenue curve is downward sloping to the right. Our marginal cost curve is here. Again, I like to draw in my marginal cost and marginal revenue intersection first. So this is going to be our quantity for the firm or for the monopoly or for the monopolistic competition, the monopolistically competitive firm. Okay. Notice again, our quantities here up to the demand curve, which is how we get our price. So this is the price of the monopoly, the monopolistically competitive firm. Keep in mind, these are the exact graphs. Okay, this is the exact same graphs. The only thing that's really different here is we have a long run, and this is what I'm assuming you guys wanted. So there's a long run equilibrium that's important here. Okay, so our long run equilibrium look like this. Once we have those in, now we're going to draw the ATC. So as with anything else, there's some important things that's going to happen here. So if we're in the long run, MR is going to equal MC. And ATC will equal demand at MR equals MC quantity. Not going on there. Okay. Not going on there. So what you need to know is MR equals MC here. then at that quantity QM, this is where ATC is going to equal price. So I'm going to draw my ATC curve. Again, this is the key here, though. It's downward sloping, but then its minimum point is here. So we're going to go down. We're going to actually hit. And there's the minimum, and then back up. I hate that curve. I'm going to redraw it. Here we go. Side swipe. Boom, back up. I like that better. So that's our ATC. Interactions there. We are now in long run equilibrium. That's it. That's monopolistic competition. Now, if we have firms entering, exiting the industry, so if we have people leaving the industry, it's actually going to shift our demand curve and marginal revenue curve down. So it's actually going to change our actual equilibrium. So that's where it gets a little tricky. But the nice thing is I have never seen you have to draw that. I've never seen it really come up in questions other than the fact that we're comparing perfect competition and monopolistic competition. So they may force you to talk about that in like multiple choice fashion. You're never going to have to draw it. Never, ever, ever going to have to draw it. How do we do? 2 hours of economics. 10 o'clock at night. We're all tired. It's good night. What do you guys need going into tomorrow? Is there anything that's important that we're missing here that we can spend some time? Keep in mind tomorrow, I know some of you are already in class today, but I am going to stay after school for an hour after school if you need any additional help, practice, taking another practice quiz, anything like that. So anything from you guys? Was that helpful? Did you learn something? Do you feel more confident? Game rating 1 to 10. 10 meaning you're 100%. Yes, we're doing the breakfast. I'll give you more information on that tomorrow too. You're 1 to 10 meaning you're 100% sure to 5. A 1 meaning you're pretty sure you shouldn't have even paid for it. Where are we at? 1 to 10. Throw it out there. Feel less overwhelmed. Good. 8.75. I'll take it. More confident. That's good. 7.5. I'll take it. 8. Very nice. 8. Good, 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 good. All right. All right. I'm feeling good too. I think you guys are going to do great. We still have tomorrow. Okay. You can still take quizzes, still ask me questions. Let me know what you need. We'll be ready to rock and roll, guys. You're fine. Have a great night. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for joining us.